maybe Leah, while you're sitting there, do you want to just give your,
Sure.
since you're sitting there before Rodrigo comes up, and then Rodrigo can make his way up here.
Perfect. So Rodrigo is going to talk about the work that UW is going to start undertaking on hemp from a research and extension education perspective. And so Michael Fields Agricultural Institute, the nonprofit that I work for, we are also going to be doing some research and education, collaborating with the university. And so what we are doing at Michael Fields is predominantly related to CBD production. That's partially due to scale and resources in terms of land that we have and labor. And so we are doing a cultivar trial. So we're basically trying to get as many cultivars as we can of CBD hemp and growing them in Wisconsin to see how they work here. As we mentioned, they're coming from these drier, different climates, and the genetics may not perform in the same way here. So trying to find what grows best. As well as then also looking at spacing. That seems to be a pretty big component. So these kind of basic agronomic understandings, so spacing, as well as then a little bit of nutrient management, looking mostly at nitrogen. So a couple different levels of rates of added N. So that's the work that, in terms of field level, that we're going to be doing. And then Rodrigo will tell you more about the field work that the university is going to be doing. And again, this is all kind of in collaboration. And so we will all be working together on this. And then in terms of education extension, where to be looking, so this webinar series would be step one. So this is the first one. We hope to have one mid-season and one end of season to really focus on harvest protocol. But as Heidi mentioned, kind of trying to get a website up and going that's really going to be the source that's going to have impact from Extension, University, as well as Michael Fields to find all the information. And without further ado, Rodrigo Werle.
Oh, this has been a tremendous morning. I mean, the amount of knowledge I've obtained here, it's been fantastic. Every time a research specialist, he told me this yesterday, every time he approaches me, he's afraid because he knows I'm going to add more to his plate there. And after this morning, I tell him to stay away from me for a week. We have a lot of ideas here. So my name is Rodrigo Werle. I'm an assistant professor in extension cropping systems weed scientist. Okay, I'm housed in the Department of Agronomy, and I represent UW Madison, the College of Ag, but also UW Extension. And I started here in Wisconsin in January of last year, so I've been in the job for a year and 4 months, and I never thought in my career I would be working with industrial hemp, and here we are. Okay, so this is the level of experience that I have with this plant species as of now. Okay, this picture was taken in 2015 when I was doing my PhD work at the University of Nebraska, and here you have a ditchweed growing by our corn plots, and it just so happened that I took that picture. Okay, so this is how much knowledge that I have, or the interaction that I've had with this plant species this far. And you may be asking yourself, so why are you there talking about the research plans for 2019 and beyond for UW-Madison? Well, the reason why is because now I hold an extension position. My job entails weed management in annual cropping systems, and industrial hemp falls under my umbrella. And as we've learned from our colleagues here today, weed management is a big problem. So that's one of the main reasons why I'm interested in this. Okay, I primarily work with conventional farmers and row crop farmers. Okay, and weed management is a big challenge as is. We have weeds evolving resistance, so managing those weeds is becoming very complicated, no matter if you're in an organic or in a conventional system. So weed management is a foundation for good crop management. Okay, but a couple things that have intrigued me is that we have no synthetic pesticides, particularly herbicides, for industrial hemp production. Okay, so in that sense, how do we control weeds in this crop? But the other concern that I have is if we're in a corn, soybean conventional system using herbicides, we're using more soil applied herbicides. And one recommendation we have for farmers that are going to be planting industrial hemp in conventional systems is to understand what they have sprayed in previous growing seasons. Okay, most herbicide labels state that you need at least 18-month interval when crops are not listed in their labels, and industrial hemp is not a crop that's listed in there. So there is this 18-month restriction interval that you got to be paying attention to if you're going to be planting. Some of the herbicides, they have very long residual activity in the soil, and they might impact establishment of that crop. So one thing you might be breaking the label, they're not following the label, so not following the law. So first understand that, but the other thing, you might be damaging your crop. Okay, so this is how far I'm going to go here in terms of herbicide programs. Okay, the other thing why I'm here today is because a couple months ago, the College of Ag and also UW Extension, they put this call for proposals. Okay, we have this new research program here in the state of Wisconsin through DATCP, started last year. As we have learned today, the interest has increased by 6-fold. Okay, so we're going to have a tremendous number of farmers growing this crop. So we're getting bombarded with questions. Okay, however, we haven't done any research at UW on production, on the agronomics and post-harvest and so on. Okay, so we have a lot to learn there. So we're starting this program in 2019. So the reason why I'm here is because I worked with several colleagues, and I'm going to list them in a minute to put a proposal together for this internal call. Okay, and it's not a whole lot of money. It's a little bit of money that's going to let us get the program going. Okay, but the objective here is to generate research-based information so we can train our extension educators and provide information, research-based information to agronomists and farmers so they can make better decisions as they move forward if they decide to bring industrial hemp as part of their cropping systems. Okay, so this is the team of researchers and educators that we have involved in this project. Okay, so starting with myself there as a lead scientist, Dr. Sean Conley is an agronomist in my department, soybeans and small grains. John Gasta is his field research specialist, is involved in the project. We have Dr. Damon Smith. Dr. Damon Smith is going to be evaluating our plots early season and also late season, checking for disease incidents. So he's going to be conducting the surveys. We have Dr. Shelby Ellison, who is here. She's got a background in plant breeding. It's going to be taking the lead on, particularly in the CBD aspect of our projects. We have Dr. Carol Abaski and soil fertility. We want to come up with our recommendations for fertility programs, so that's where she plays an important role. We're working closely with Dr. Aaron Silva on the organic side, how to bring this crop into organic systems. Dr. Brian Luck in the Biosystems Engineering Department, he's going to be conducting some research looking at the harvest aspect of this crop. Dr. Paul Mitchell and the Ag Econ department, and then Dr. Irvin Goldman there with the plant breedings and horticulture department. Okay, so this is the team of researchers we put together, and then we have a team of educators. So Lee's University in Brown County, Carl Dooley, Buffalo Extension County, and then we have Jerry Clark in Chippewa County. Okay, so we have a team of research specialists and educators across the state that are working together in this project. We have many other supporters as well. Okay, I also want to list some of our collaborators. Our deans and administrators have been keen on this. They've been challenging us to get this program going, particularly Dr. Bill Barker, Dr. Rainman, Patrick Robinson, and then we have Heidi Johnson here in the room with us. We're very thankful for the support we've had and the great collaboration we've had with DATCP thus far. It's been great, and I hope the research we conduct, we can also help them with their programming moving forward. I also want to thank Mike Bartram with the UW Arlington Ag Research Station. We're going to have several plots there, and Mike is making sure we can accommodate our research needs. We're thankful to them. Leah Sandler is here with us. She presented. She is with Michael Fields. She's been an incredible partner. We've met a couple of times already. We've been picking her brain, and the same is true for Brian here in the room here. So they've been very instrumental, and we're fortunate to have them because Leah got her PhD in Indiana, Purdue, so she worked with the crop before. Brian has been an agronomist with the crop now with experience. Again, we have no experience, our own team, so they've been instrumental as we get our program going here. So the way we structure this proposal, we have this three-pronged approach to build industrial hemp education capacity. So we're trying to go beyond research. Okay, so the hardcore here is going to be the heavy part of this proposal. It's going to be around the research, because as I said, we have no data. So we want to generate as much data as we can in a short period of time so we can provide some research-based information and recommendations to our extension colleagues around the state with the university, so that information can be disseminated to agronomists, decision influencers, and farmers. Okay, and what's also unique about this proposal is that we also have a teaching component, which I'm going to describe in a minute. Okay, because we want to be starting to train the next generation of decision influencers, particularly if this crop takes off. Okay. So what I'm going to do here for this first part of the presentation, I'm going to go through some of the work we're going to be doing. There are 4 or 5 different major projects that we're going to be working on, and I'm briefly going to describe them here. Okay, the first 3-4 projects I'm going to talk about are going to be more focused on the grain and fiber research or aspect, and that's because coming from the agronomy department, you know, the grain production kind of falls under our umbrella here. So that's going to be an important component of our research there. So the first one is going to be a variety trial study, okay, that's going to be conducted at 3 sites across the state of Wisconsin. So at Arlington Ag Research Station, so that's Columbia County, that's our headquarters there for our agronomic research, okay. And then the other 2 sites are going to be Buffalo County and Chippewa County, and we're going to be working with Carl and Jerry there, who are the local extension educators. They're going to help us establish the plots and collect the data. Okay. The caveat here is getting seeds for the variety trials. As I said, this proposal was recently awarded, and in this past 2-3 weeks, I've been working hard to make sure I can get seeds. So for now, for sure, I have a variety from Legacy Hemp. Hopefully, Brian brought the seeds here. We're supposed to get them later today. So we're going to have a Legacy Hemp variety X59, that's for sure. Part of the study. I'm in communication with colleagues in the Hemp Genetics International source there. So we have 5 other varieties that I placed in order. Okay, so CRS1, CFX2, Catania, Grandi, and Piccolo. So those are the varieties that are coming from Canada that I'm going to be including. And then the other source that I've had success obtaining response from is through Parkland Industrial Hemp growers. And they have 2 varieties, Canada and Joey. The challenge is that apparently right now they cannot send seeds to the US. Okay, so I don't know what's going to happen in this next couple weeks. Assuming things go well, we may be able to get those seeds, otherwise they won't be included in our variety trials. Okay, so coming from a corn, soybean world, wheat world, you know, obtaining seeds was never much of a challenge. This is a different ball game here. Okay, so if you don't have your seeds ordered, you better hurry up if you want to be able to plant this growing season. Okay, so the way we're going to conduct this study is traditional agronomic research. We're going to have 10 by 30 foot plots replicated 4 times. Our plots are going to be drilled at 30 pounds, and I'm happy that I'm again sitting here today because our seeding rate kind of falls under the recommendations that Brian shared earlier. So that's going to be our seeding rate, and our targeted planting date is June 1st after rain. So not before rain here. We actually discussed about it. We want to have good conditions there for establishment of our crop. The data to be collected, we're going to keep track of what's happening with the crop throughout the season, but the main response variables, that's going to be grain, fiber yield, and then the THC content. The THC content is important for DATCP and also important for the grower to be able to grow that crop and not have issues at the end. But again, we're going to be taking disease incidents. We're going to be collecting weed pressure in those plots. There's going to be a tremendous amount of data that's going to be coming out of this variety trial research. Okay, so that's the first one. The next one I want to talk about is this agronomic study that we're going to be conducting. The primary site for this research is going to be in Columbia County at the Arlington Ag Research Station in Arlington, Wisconsin. Excuse me. The structure for this trial, we're going to look at 2 varieties, X59 and then CRS1. We intend to look at 3 different seeding rates, 20, 30, and 40 pounds per acre. And then we have 3 nitrogen rates, 0, 70, and 140 pounds per acre. Okay, so this study, Sean Conley, John Gaston, myself, others are working closely with Dr. Carol Labosky okay? Because our intention here is to collect grain yield, fiber yield, THC content, and help us fine-tune our recommendations, okay, for farmers. So that's the primary goal of this study. Okay, and as you're going to see in my slide, I have 2019 for sure. We have funds to conduct all this research I'm describing in 19. It's a question mark for what happens next year, but we're doing our due diligence, and we're going to be working on grants and trying to obtain extra more funding here so we can continue this program and serve our clientele. Okay, so moving on to study 3. This is a study that's going to be conducted in partnership with Dr. Erin Silva. So she's an organic systems specialist in the Department of Plant Pathology at UW-Madison. For this study here, we're trying to go back to the whole weed management question, okay? And I guess the weed management question not only applies to organic system, but also applies to conventional systems, because no herbicides can be used within those systems, or at least synthetic herbicides can be used into those systems. So cultural practices, mechanical practices are of extreme importance. And as Brian mentioned, and I couldn't agree more with him, is site selection is key. So you want to be going into sites with low pressure. We have this site here where we're going to be testing the concept. We have good pressure, good foxtail pressure, which seems to be a common problem, lamb sporters and some of the other pigweeds. So this is where we're going to be establishing this trials. So for this trials here, we have a 2 planting time component. We want to plant early. By early, I mean mid-May. And then we also want to plant late. And by late, I mean mid-June. Okay. Question being is, if we plant early, can we have an advantage over the weeds, or are we better off letting them come, eliminate them, and establish that crop later? So that's the first question we want to address here. The second one, within each one of these planting times, we're going to be looking at row spacing integrated with weed management strategies. So we're going to have 2 main row spaces. We're going to drill at 7.5 inch row spacing, and we're going to compare that to a 30-inch row spacing system. Okay, so drill versus if you have a corn planter system at your farm. The advantage of a 30-inch row system is that allows for inter-row cultivation in season, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing there. So in the 7.5 inch row spacing and the 30-inch row spacing, we're going to plant, and we're going to look at the impact of rotary hoeing or the tiny weeding there. Okay, but then a sub-treatment on the 30-inch row spacing will be inter-row cultivation in season. So at the end of the season, we're going to be taking weed biomass, weed density there, and then we're going to take all these plots to yield to then understand the impact of planting time, weed control on overall crop production here. Okay, and again, the study is going to be conducted at the organic site at Arlington Ag Research Station. Okay, I want to switch gears now from the fiber grain research, and I want to talk a little bit about the CBD research that's going to be led by Shelby and other colleagues. So what they're going to be doing, they're going to grow 5 high CBD varieties. So they're going to select 25 female plants per variety. They're going to keep track of all the cultural practices. This study is going to be established for sure in Iowa County, and potentially at 2 additional locations, the Chippewa and Buffalo counties, with again Jerry and Carl, which are the extension educators at those sites. Okay, and in terms of data collection, they're going to keep track of flowering time, the seed time for seed set, yield, and then the CBD quantification. Okay, some additional projects that Shelby is interested in, and I just list them in there. If you have specific questions, maybe she can take them later, because I probably wouldn't know the answers. But the first one is looking at ethylene inhibitors as they relate to inducing male flowers. And then the other thing she's going to be working on, she's going to be collecting pharaoh hemp germplasm. And as a weed scientist, I'm also interested, so we hope we can help her expand our collections there for potential breeding programs down the road, just to have some genetic diversity there. Okay, so this is all I'm going to talk about the research related to this proposal through the university and college that they just, an extension that they just described. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about extension. So as you saw, we're going to have multiple different research trials established throughout the state. We intend to have to host field days at this site so the clientele can come and check our research plots let us make the mistakes in our research plots, come learn from us, and then take the message home, I guess. Is always, I think, it's a good, that's the beauty of our job here. We can do that on a small scale, and, we'll take the hit financially on that. But for you, it's more complicated. So we tend to have this field day. And historically, we had the Agronomy and Soils Field Day the 3rd week of August. Next Monday now, we're going to have our meeting for that field day, and a potential there is to have a special track in the afternoon where we could partner up with our colleagues, Michael Fields and then Legacy Hemp, and then hopefully have a 2-hour plot tour there so that we can discuss and exchange information. Okay, Carl and Jerry and Buffalo and Chippewa County, they're also interested, and perhaps Shelby would also be interested in hosting some plot tours at their respective locations in Buffalo, Chippewa, and Iowa counties. Okay. The one thing we're trying to do too is to collect as much data as possible, gather as much information as possible to train our UW extension educators. They're getting at the local county level, they're getting bombarded with questions, and they don't necessarily have all the information like we don't as well. So we're trying to work with lists, and hopefully in the next winter, we're going to have a boot camp for our educators, so then they're better prepared to handle the general questions they've been getting. Okay, we intend to have extension bulletins and videos available at the end of the season. As Heidi mentioned, we're going to be developing a web page there through UW, so that's going to be our main source for sharing the information. Okay, so a little bit of the teaching aspect of this. Credit to Shelby. So she's going to be leading a class at UW. This class is going to be offered in the spring of 2020. So this class is going to be offered to the Department of Horticulture, and it's going to be co-taught by Shelby and Dr. Goldman there. So the components of the course will be all around history, legislation, genetics, propagation, and so on. Okay, and they also hope to have guest lecturers, as we had here this morning, to share their experiences with the students. Couple additional slides that I just want to point out. Dr. Brian Luck sent this to me. This is a project that's not affiliated to the main proposal we had, but him and Dr. Kevin Shinners are going to be working on this. So they're going to have a 10-acre plot at Arlington, and they're going to have this plots planted at 2 spacings there, 15 versus 30. Okay, and what they want to do, they want to compare 2 harvesting systems. So they want to compare a John Deere 9750 combine versus a Draper header. Okay, so that's a large-scale study that they're going to be conducting, so stay tuned on that. And I just want to point out that the Wisconsin Crop Innovation Center, for those of you who are not familiar, that's a biotech service and research center through the university. It's located in Middleton, so west of Madison, and communication with Dr. Sean Capper, who is also in the agronomy department and the director of the Crop Innovation Center. They're getting a lot of inquiries on industrial hemp research, so they're also going to be starting their efforts there. Okay, it's important as a grower, if you're going to do it at a commercial level, you got to have a market, and we don't have a good sense of the market yet. So in communication with Dr. Paul Mitchell and the Econ department, they're working with the Rank Agribusiness Institute, and they intend to conduct a marketing study. And the primary question is, can one make money producing industrial hemp? So what are the optimal conditions, and what's the likelihood of being profitable growing this crop? Okay, so this is kind of where you got to understand that we all do as a producer. If you ought to have the supply to attend the demand. In order to have the supply, you need to know how to grow the crop. The demand has to be there so you can be profitable. But this is how we feel in terms of information too. There's been this tremendous demand. Everything is happening really fast, but we're at initial stages of our program. So we ask for clientele to be a little patient and help with us, exchange knowledge as much as they can. So hopefully in a couple of years from now, we're going to have stronger recommendations, and we look forward to that. So Heidi's telling me to stop talking here. So we have 30 minutes or 35 minutes for questions at the end. And then the entire group is still here. So thank you all for joining us today. It's been a great day.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the question section. I think we'll go all the way back to the beginning, which means that probably a lot of them are gonna be for the Department of Ag. If I were to contract with a local professional greenhouse to start my hemp seedlings before transplanting them, would the farmer need to have a grower license, even though the scope of what they're doing is just starting the plants for the first few weeks of life?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
If I can grow seed/clone in my residence, but outside the field, can I grow it in an outbuilding on my property year round to full term?
Yes. You just can't grow it in your house.
Okay. Are deer a concern?
Yes.
Okay.
That says yes.
Oh, this is an Illinois question. I don't know if we can take this one. Oh, no, it's gone. Tony, where'd that one go? Okay, it's Illinois. How far will hemp pollen drift? Curious if pollen from native ditchweed or neighboring fields will affect our feminized CBD plants.
Yeah, so that's also another study we hope to do at the UW, is to look at some genetic drift or gene flow studies to see, because with wind pollination, we mentioned it might be in the tens to hundreds of meters. Once you get insects in the mix, they can start traveling, a mile away. So it's just going to be how far that pollen can flow, as well as what the frequency of that flow is. So we hope to conduct some of those studies, but I would say, somewhere between 100 meters and a mile, then try to keep it at least a mile away.
So this question I'm going to summarize. They're concerned about you need to have a distance between CBD and fiber. So shouldn't there be a strategy and licenses to try to keep people more greater distance?
Yeah.
There is the Canada, maybe Ryan, you were gonna elaborate on that. Canada, actually, they have kind of grassroots meetings where growers come together and determine who's growing and what and where. But it's not, even in Canada where they're doing, it's not the directive of the government.
Right. Growers need to work this out. There are problems with other crops too, and there are no laws for this. It's just, it needs to be good neighbor relations.
Yeah, the thing I had mentioned is, I know it's not possible now with the current law, but just by allowing farmers to have an idea of where other growers are at in proximity to their operation will be extremely helpful, because it will get to that point where neighbors will be able to talk to neighbors about this problem. Right now we have the privacy issue with the law currently written. So once that changes, I think we'll have better opportunities for people to talk to each other.
All right, and I know there was a question somewhere in there about a map available for where everyone is. At this point, the privacy laws don't allow you to share, even to advertise this meeting. We have to give the information to the Department of Ag and they have to share it. So for testing purposes, how will you treat breeding populations? How will you support small and independent farmer breeders? We've already
Yeah, we did that
we
already.
answered that one. Sorry about that. Are there any reports or information on the economics of growing hemp in Wisconsin? Brian did a quick rundown of the economics of grain production. There was a question in there about CBD, which we didn't get to.
Yeah, as far as CBD, it's still so new, and there's getting to be pretty decent data, kind of nationwide. I don't know any good sources of Wisconsin specific data, but you can find some industry data on the internet. It's really hasn't leveled out or kind of streamlined. It's still a pretty kind of volatile situation.
Well, the next one's kind of the same. Average return per acre on this type of production, which that was asked at 10 a.m., which would have been during the grain, which I think you went through that, okay? Will DATCP support exclusion zones to separate CBD and grain hemp in regions most conducive to each crop? They are absolutely not compatible. The pollen will ruin, so we need exclusion zones, which I think gets back to the same issue we already talked about. Will DATCP require biosafe greenhouse production of medical marijuana if approved by the legislature to separate to protect cross-pollination.
We can't talk about any laws that don't exist yet, so.
Back to Illinois again. Whoa. Well, it's probably relevant. Excellent soil in central Illinois. Do you suggest drip tape or black plastic mulch or not? Oh, drip tape with black plastic mulch or not?
It really depends on your situation. You know, it's not a bad way to go. I'll say that.
With the black plastic mulch, you can hold water in the soil better, but you also you have less access potentially to some of the rainfall, I guess would be.
Yes.
So depending on how much rainfall you're getting.
So if you're using like a living mulch, like a clover, and you're mowing it, is it safe if the trimmings are hitting the plants, or does that cause problems?
No, that's okay.
Okay, good. Do you see the CBD hemp market growing primarily indoors over the coming years?
No.
Hey, I love those.
I'm trying to do short answers.
Lots of clay in Wisconsin. Any further suggestions? For example, we have a fair amount of clay. It is tiled and planting on higher spots. We plan to use black plastic. Any thoughts on that? Sorry, I'm not exactly sure.
So I would be careful of the overwatering situation. So in my mind, a sandy loam, a good draining soil is ideal. So if you've got a heavy clay, I would be reluctant to also put plastic down, just as a general theme, but I'd have to look into it further.
Do you recommend foliar water applications using supplement nutrients like zinc, manganese, iron, copper, boron? Flower growers spray leaves for absorbing. Injecting a 535 liquid fertilizer into drip line prior to flowering will hemp leaf flower absorb water.
Sure. I mean, I don't know the growers individually. I know that particularly in like high production situations, growers will spray foliar applications for nutrients, as well as then fertigation, as we talked about the drip tape. I don't know specifically if cannabis or hemp leaves take up nutrients. I mean, they're like any other leaf, and so kind of the basic biological principles apply. That's kind of as much answer I have, which is I know it happens. It doesn't. I don't know that it's necessary.
Yeah, I would say that it's probably not necessary, and I think of fertigation is more efficient than a foliar. Yes. You know, and that goes with over the top pivot, you know, type watering as well. I mean, you're going to be watering, you know, a lot of ground that doesn't have a plant right there. So just in general, I think, you know, drip irrigation would be more efficient. And just as we addressed earlier, be really careful with overfeeding your plants, you know, speaking in terms of that THC threshold situation.
Is it okay to start the plants in cups versus the planters? We have 16-ounce cups, and we'll have holes in them for the water to be able to flow out.
Yeah, that's fine if you have the capability of, you know, planting those efficiently into the ground.
How can I get involved in the UW industrial hemp variety trials for grain and fiber?
Providing seeds or hosting a site. That's just send us an email.
You could probably start with your county extension educator and contact your county extension office and see if they are interested in working with you to get a hold of Rodrigo and initiate a site. Rodrigo, if you were doing a CBD crop, how would you personally handle weed control? Say 10 acres total, plastic, cover crop, etc. Thanks. I would start with the cover crops and keep it mellow. This would be my start. You know, you're talking 10 acres here, so that investment would be tremendous. So personally, that's how I would start. I don't know if the others agree.
Yeah, I would.
But yeah, that's where I would go. And then the one thing is somebody asked about terminating the cover crop. I think you would just terminate it on the seed bed, right? And then leave the rest and just mow it accordingly and timely.
So. Yeah.
In regard to outdoor growing in major ag areas, was there any issues with chemical drift, volatilization, i.e. dicamba? This year, was there any dicamba drift issues?
So
we didn't see any.
So overall, I don't think we've had as many instances of dicamba off-target movement as other states have. So that has to do to that. So as we grow more and as we use more dicamba, it goes back to the communication. Talk to your neighbors. If you have farmers that are going to be using dicamba, right by systems that are sensitive, that communication is extremely important. Follow the labels.
But hemp would be susceptible to dicamba.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I grow CBD hemp indoors in a garage on a property in a residential area as long as I am not flowering it in the house/residence?
Say that again.
Can I grow CBD hemp indoors in a garage on a property in a residential area as long as I'm not flowering it in the house/residence?
As long as you're not growing it in your house, you can grow it in a garage.
Garages are okay. We have 30 acres. Should we plant all of it? It has been in alfalfa for 7 years with a tenant. Do we have to prep the ground to plant hemp?
Yeah, you can do a no-till situation, and the question of whether you should plant all of it or not, you just really have to understand, the requirements, the inputs that are required and the money required to get started. So that's a really long answer. You need to have a really good understanding of what it's going to take. So if you haven't done it before, I would recommend starting smaller than that.
As a licensed grower, I understand that I am allowed to process my own crop. What exactly is considered processing that can be done on our farm? Does everything ranging from dehydrating my plants and trimming the flowers all the way to making extractions or body lotions or tea blends count as processing?
Yes.
Yes. What do you,
But you need a processing fee a license.
Not your own crop.
Not your own,
You
okay.
can do your own crop.
Okay.
We do say that what we've been saying is harvesting, drying as part of the growing process. Anything after that becomes processing.
And you need to be aware that there are other laws that may apply to products that you develop. So you have responsibility for finding out what those are.
right. What are the largest square bales of fiber being marketed and what are they being used for?
Typically, they're 3x3x8 square bales, and as of right now, most have been for the herd. However, there's a company in Kentucky as well as South Carolina using the bass fibers. I don't know what they're using it for, though.
What do you think about planting CBD hemp into a no-till cornfield 4x4 spacing?
Corn is a high nutrient feeder, so what nutrients do you have left in the soil,
Right.
as well as are you going to be covering it any other way if you've taken all of the corn silage and all?
What evidence exists what evidence exists for hot tests seen from over-fertilization versus waiting too long to harvest? I'm very skeptical of this. What you are essentially saying is that certain fertility practices will tighten the peaks between CBD and THC maximums, which doesn't make sense because CBD is a precursor to THC.
CBD is not a precursor.
My understanding is that CBD isn't a precursor to THC. These are two independent things. So as far as the part about what over-fertilization versus waiting too long to harvest. So increased fertilization is going to increase cannabinoid production, which will increase CBD and THC earlier in that plant's life, which will, make your plants potentially test hot, earlier in their lives, but they also, produce cannabinoids, and as they reach, their final stages of maturity, they're going to have more CBD and THC, so you can test hot. But CBD and THC are different things.
Potentially also they're referring to the fact that I think you're right that CBD and THC peak, but they peak slightly differently, but they're not related. It's CBD would peak a little bit earlier before the peak of THC. So maybe that's, so you're, yeah, the waiting,
Right.
maybe like, oh, well, it's if you wait too long, the THC will have increased. But it's not, and that could happen from fertilization, right? But it's not because CBD has peaked. That's not what THC is then peaking. It's just how the plant.
Right.
Right. Can we start plants in our house? Yes. How was THC determined in 2018?
It was the delta 9. It's the equation you have there. It's the delta 9 THC plus the THCA times the conversion factor 0.877.
Thank you. Do we need the coordinates for our drying location as well?
I would say yes.
Yes, that's
If I bought seed from a friend who had extra, who was part of a very successful hemp operation in Colorado, who did buy those originally from a licensed grower on your site, am I still able to use those seeds for planting?
I don't see why not. Yes. Yes, is the answer.
Mary Usselman is still waiting for DATCP to check her crop.
Mary, yeah, I just emailed her. We need the planting report, and it's available on the web, or we can mail it to you.
Great. Okay. Is the total THC test method a compendial test method?
What's compendial?
We have a stumper.
Yeah, I don't know. It's done by high performance liquid chromatography that separates the 8 major cannabinoids, and then it's an area under the curve that calculates the ratio. So HPLC, it's testing for that, as they just said, the THC plus THCA plus times conversion factor.
Okay, what is the time period from sample collection, testing, and issuing a report?
The sample collection, when a sample is taken, it's taken directly to the lab. The lab has an allowance of a 2-week time period, and as soon as they issue the report to us, we get that report out within a day or 2. So,
All right. Our greenhouse and field are within the same GPS coordinates, so we should be good, right?
As long as it's listed on their license.
Will you notify growers, processors when you publish new information, such as the report of test results from last year?
We will work on that, yes.
What are the minimum number of plants that need to be tested for CBD?
we want growers to have at least 15 plants available for testing. If they have fewer plants than that, and the plants are really small, we have trouble sometimes getting enough material to test. So we're requiring at least 15 plants available for testing.
We need a separate test for each greenhouse plant, for each greenhouse plants are in, or just one test?
It would probably be separate tests, depending, would likely be separate tests. So we would have to actually come there and see what the situation is. But for separate fields, for separate varieties, separate greenhouses, would probably be separate tests.
Well, when will pesticide approved list be amended? There are no biological chemicals. So where do we stand with that? IECs is not on the list.
EPA has a list of approved, and you would have to go through that list. I wouldn't know on top of my head. I just saw that list earlier this week. So there is a list from EPA.
Of the 21 failed tests, how did they destroy the crop?
There were different methods. There was, depending on what the plants were, some plants were actually chipped and spread on the field. Some were just tilled under, some were burned, some were piled and kind of chipped up, chopped up, and composted. Those are the basic methods.
Okay. So somebody made a mention when we were talking about crop insurance. Crop insurance may not be available, but you can get insured through the FSA NAP program. But can you get insured through the FSA NAP program? Not sure, you'd have to check in with the FSA office in your county. Can you start in greenhouses and then move outdoors once the weather is optimal?
Yes.
Yes. Is there a maximum number of sample tests we can purchase per growing season?
For regulatory purposes, we take one official sample per variety per field.
If you plant clones that are Wisconsin certified strains, you need the original seed certification from the clone supplier. The Wisconsin original website said that if you plant certified seed and they go hot, you are not criminally liable, but it did not mention clone planting.
What was the question?
Oh God, now.
So certified seed versus certified clones.
Yeah,
Are there
so
such a thing?
I'm not aware of any certified clones.
Okay,
Um,
so you can go back to open one.
Will
Will statistics on testings success/fail for THC and varieties be published?
yeah.
How do you plan to address cross-pollination issues? We don't, right?
That's a communication issue with neighbors. And as previously mentioned, with another question, currently the law does not allow us to share any information of growers or processors, but the new law that will eventually be in place will likely allow for that.
And I mean, it's not something you can necessarily do, but when picking your location, you can think about wind breaks that will also deter pollen flow. So if you have a place where you have a tree line or something that's a windbreak, that might deter pollen flow, as well as, you know, same with insects. If you have an area where insects might prefer to pollinate over your hemp crop, to plant that little area.
And along those lines, you could plant something like corn or a crop that would be a windbreak that
Physical
could
barrier.
be an annual that you could get grown. Yeah.
If I plant in a field for CBD, but I want to keep some males and females in a separate greenhouse of the same variety so I can get seeds for next year, do you test the fields? How do you test that? The greenhouse would only have a few plants, one place for CBD, and the other would be seed.
We're testing plants for anything that's being harvested. So
For testing purposes, how will you treat breeding populations? How will you support, I think we already did that. Okay. If we have a grower license number, how do we register it, and how can we add a processor license?
So if you have a grower license and you wanted to grow, you would have registered to grow by March 1st. And if you wanted to add a processor license, you would have done that also by March 1st. So you would have to wait until next year now to get these additional registrations and licenses.
Do drying facility locations need to be registered and inspected?
They need to be registered or on your licensed locations. And then inspections will be, we don't have anything structured for inspections right now, but.
Okay, let's see. This is a non-DATCP question. Any thoughts on using pruning methods or weighing branches down on a smaller plot with good spacing as a way to increase quantity of flower formation per plant?
Yeah, typically with hemp crop, you know, we don't take the care and some of the training and so forth that you might with a marijuana crop. So in my opinion, unless you're just doing a few plants and you want to, you know, really, you know, maximize these plants, it's not really time well spent on a larger scale. So I guess it depends on your scale and how much time you have. But doing these things can potentially yield more flour, sellable biomass. So
As a processor, when I import concentrations such as isolate, crude, and tinctures from other states, is paperwork, i.e. COA, fit for commerce, required for me to process, or does this rely more on your own company's quality standards / policy? Note, all products received and processed will be sent out for third-party testing before sale to the public. Thank you.
Yeah, that's up to your own quality standards and record keeping.
Are processors required to send samples of each output, crude, distillate, isolate, or will these be compliant as long as we use approved plant material during the extraction process?
Samples of those are not required.
And that's one of the big controversy right now in terms of what's being regulated on crude, distillate, and isolate for FDA, et cetera. So, but it sounds like DATCP is not responsible for that.
Okay. With the high number of grower applications, how do you anticipate handling testing and potential backlog? Will they be held to the 2-week or could it go past the 2-week turnaround?
We don't expect it to go past the 2-week turnaround, and we will be hiring additional staff for sampling.
Those seem to be all Schedule 25 pesticides. Will other pesticides listed as non-harmful by the EPA be allowed, such as potassium bicarbonate?
Those are all organic and they're all minor or potentially minor use, so they're going to be on the EPA website.
Okay. Can I plant seeds that are not approved? I think we answered that already. If starts are made in the greenhouse, can it be transported to a different field site location, maybe several miles apart?
Yeah, we talked about that, as long as the locations are listed underneath their license.
Okay, well, nope, okay. Nope. Just a suggestion, but sounds like testing could be a constraint capacity gating item. Is there any thoughts to transferring the test method to another lab to help during peak periods?
We have thought about that, and we might do that if necessary.
What if the commercial farmer next to me to the field I want to plant will not use DATCP suggests for herbicides to use, and they continue to spray Roundup? That's report. I mean, it's used off label. It's reportable.
If you have a drift, then
The Department of Ag.
yeah, then you file a
Yeah, if
complaint.
there's a drift issue, you can report.
Yeah.
Prices growers received for high CBD flower grown in 2018. Okay.
Don't know.
What about growing in a garage? I already did that one. That's a thank you. Let's see. If I have one strain growing in 2 different substrates, do I need to get both tested?
Likely, yes, not really knowing what that it means entirely, but
Okay. How sensitive are transplants to frost?
they're pretty sensitive to really low temperature or really high temperature when they're a little transplant. They'll get really hardy, and come harvest they can handle some pretty substantial frost. But as a transplant, they're going to be pretty sensitive to low temps.
Okay, I think this was back to Brian, your presentation. Would rotation of a cover crop address monocrop concerns?
It would to an extent, yes. I know some organic farmers use this method where they'll plant corn and either interseed with a cover crop, and then the following year they'll replant corn again. It's possible, but it's a very short period of time that you're breaking up that cycle. So there may be some benefit, but it'd probably be minimal.
Okay, I think this was during yours, Shelby. Does that disease susceptibility trial include CBD? Is that yours? Do you recognize that one? That was at 11 o'clock.
Research.
No. Okay. On determining sex is the 6th week from the time the seed goes in the ground. How would you determine the time frame if using transplants?
Well, just try to figure out how old your transplant is. I mean, it depends on how old the little clone or the seedling is.
Yeah, and it's a range typically.
Yeah.
So 4 to 6 weeks, you can start early. I mean, if it's not showing, just keep looking. If you can't tell
Right.
what sex it is, it's not a concern quite yet. So
Yeah.
4 to 6.
Someone should mention that you need to be cautious of taking cuttings to make mother plants and produce clones if you signed an MTA. Okay.
Yeah, so what that means though is where you're sourcing your material from. So if there's an agreement that you're making with that person you're sourcing seed or clones from, whether or not you can make cuttings from the mother plant or grow seed from your plants and save the seed. So that all is going to come from the person you're buying your clones or seeds from, what you're allowed to do with it in future generations of that plant. So you need to be aware of the legality of that.
Okay, well, we are rounding up. Let's see if we can get 2 more in here. Does the land have to be certified organic for CBD? Are there ppm, ppb thresholds of residual herbicides from prior crop?
It does not have to be certified organic.
Okay,
And the residual herbicide question, there's no answer to that because the concentration, the impact it has, it varies on the soil structure. So follow the labels.
okay. Could plants be covered during pollination to prevent pollination? I think they mean crossing.
Yeah, they can. I mean, it's not very feasible unless you just have a couple plants in your yard. But in that case, you could cover them, and it might keep them safe from getting pollinated, I suppose.
If I were to contract with a local professional greenhouse to start my hemp seedlings, would that farmer need to have a grower license even though the scope of what they were doing is literally just starting the plants? I think we answered that one.
Yes, they need a license.
Okay. That can't answer that one. Do you have one of the graphs for phosphorus? Because I think it's important for flower growth. So I think that was during years.
Yes,
There
there.
had a nitrogen. and-
Yes, I believe that there is a phosphorus one. I will get it to the website.
Okay. Do growers need to worry about airborne pesticides?
That's kind of a drift.
That would be a drift issue.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. All right, we are now at 1 o'clock. So do we want to wrap it up, team? Okay. All right, well, thank you. There's still a lot of questions out there. I realize that we didn't get them all answered, but we will be we'll look over all the questions. And if there's other stuff as we're building a website for extension, if there's things that we could answer in there, we will try to do it. And we really thank everybody for participating. Thank you.